So that's PMS that should be short in nature. Where it becomes abnormal is where those symptoms become very intense. So instead of just irritability, you now have depression or very intense feelings that might need to be dealt with. Or if it becomes very long, so instead of just the 1 to 3 days, suddenly it's going on for a week, 2 weeks, so half of your cycle, half of the month, you spend feeling miserable. Now that's the time where I'd say you definitely need to look for help.
Well,
because it shouldn't be like that.
That's debilitating.
Yeah.
Hello, and welcome to the Pure in Heart Show. You're with Michelle this week. Harry will be back, but it's kind of more of a women's day today. So I have some lovely guests with us, and I'm excited to get into it. So please welcome, well, it's just me actually, but I'd like to welcome Nurse Kay and Dr. Kirsty here, and they're from NaProTechnology. And we're going to learn a bit more about what they do and who they serve and everything like that. So welcome to the show. How are you?
Thank you so much for having us. Thank you.
Hi. Oh, good. I hope the travel was okay and the transport wasn't too bad.
Absolutely. Perfect. It's great to be here. Thank you.
Good. So welcome back, everyone. And we hope that you've been doing well. I'm trying to think, do we have some updates? I was at Hope Fest lately. I think on Friday there was an event down in Maynooth because we always try to share our mission and what we're doing at Pure in Heart with young people to get them invested and interested in our mission. So that was really good. And then we have some upcoming events in April as well, but more on that because we're still organizing them as we go. So for anyone listening that has Instagram, feel free to follow us at Pure in Heart IRL. And also, if you're interested in any of the questions today, you can text Radio Maria live right now at 089-467-2000, 089-467-2000. And I'll also give out the details on NaPro and how to contact them throughout the show if anything we're discussing raises questions. And also just for anyone, driving home, picking up the kids, anything like that, due to the nature of our show, today we would just advise that it's going to be on women's health, women's cycle, and all of that. So please, listener discretion is advised in the sense of just discerning the audience. So thank you very much, and we'll get started with a prayer. Okay. In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Thank you, Lord, today for bringing us here. Please bless our conversation. Please help us to bring to light the truth and goodness of human sexuality today, and especially in regards to women's health and how to care for the female body. Please bless our speakers, enlighten them with the Holy Spirit, and bless their work that they do throughout Ireland. Glory be to the Father, and to the Son, and to the Holy Spirit.
As it was in the beginning, is now, and ever shall be, world without end. Amen.
In the name of the Father, and the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Amen. Okay. Well, will you both share just a little bit about yourself and maybe your background? That would be great. Would you like to go first, Kay? Or?
Yes. Well, I'm Kay O'Dwyer, and I am a fertility care practitioner, and I have been that since 1998.
Wow.
It's a long time.
Whoa.
And I've been teaching clients for that length of time without stop, and it is the most amazing work.
That's incredible.
Sort of talking to women, understanding women, and sharing in their lives. And it's just, I've been blessed.
That's so
truly
great.
Blessed to have had such a relationship with women of all ages, from teenage right through to menopause, for all of those years. And every day is a school day. Every day there is something new.
Yeah.
And I thank God for His creation every day. And when you look around you and you look at the animals, you look at the birds, you look at the seashores, you look at the sky, and the wonder of it all.
Yeah.
And women are no different. Women are absolutely wonderful. They're made in the likeness of God, but a woman is different to man insofar as she is very curvy. So she has curvy moods. She has curvy body outline. She has curvy energy levels. And
Just
she
lots
has
of ups and
curvy
downs.
cycles.
Yeah.
She is curvy in every way. So she's not straight or
We
predictable.
are complex creatures, the
Creatures.
woman. And as you said, like there's so much beauty in creation. And then to see that women, as we see in Genesis, that women were made last. And God said that it was very good seeing Adam and Eve. So yeah, it is kind of that we get to, in a unique way, portray beauty in the world.
Yes.
So yeah, and that's why it's so important that health should never be like a hobby or a side thing that you just take care of every once in a while. That it's integral to who we are. Just as you said, these ups and downs of just our month and just the hormones, and it's what keeps us going. Yeah, yeah. And then Dr. Kirsty, would you share a bit about yourself?
Sure. So I'm a GP by training, and I suppose in the years of being a GP, have met a lot of women and been always interested in women's health. And then a few years ago, got to meet Kay, and through Kay, trained as a NaProTechnology practitioner.
That's wonderful.
And so I now do a little bit of both.
That's so good. And I can only imagine that it's very difficult climate right now to be in the health profession in Ireland and kind of just be swimming against the tide. So yeah, you guys are doing incredible work, just because unfortunately women's health isn't too understood in Ireland. Like it's just,
Not at all.
I don't know if our listeners are aware, but unfortunately many young women, and I've had many friends that this has happened to as well, where they have complications, they have certain symptoms coming up. And when they go to their GP, unfortunately, because they don't have the background or just the insight on the women's health, they're just diagnosed a pill,
We see that a lot.
Yeah.
Women don't have the choice to choose what's life-affirming and choose what's good for them and good for their bodies.
Yeah.
And we find it incredibly sad because women, they deserve so much more. And like you say, we're made so beautifully and so wonderfully.
Yeah.
And I feel that a lot of women's healthcare at the minute doesn't respect that. And that's what we try to do.
Absolutely, because it just doesn't do justice in any way. And it's not real healthcare, honestly, because at the best that it can do, for listeners, that just to clarify, my understanding of it is that there is an allowance to use the pill if it's prescribed. If you've really bad symptoms, it helps put them a little bit in remission, but it's not helpful because they're fake hormones, and it's only putting kind of a toxic Band-Aid on a situation. And that's all with not preventing life at the same time. So it's very complex, and it's ultimately unhelpful. Would you agree, really, to put a woman on the pill?
I say not only unhelpful, but often unhealthy. So
yeah, absolutely.
It shuts down a woman's natural cycle. And so it shuts down a good part of what makes us women.
Yeah.
And it has a lot of side effects. And there's really a lot to it. And often, like you said, it's a Band-Aid on a problem. It doesn't solve the problem itself.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
So I suppose here it might be no harm just to mention what a cycle actually consists of. Because we talk about cycles, but very few women actually know what a cycle really is. So a cycle starts with the first day of a period. It should be red.
Yeah.
After that, and it should have a minimum of 3 days, maximum of 7, and should have a crescendo, decrescendo pattern. So as in come in light, go to heavy, moderate, light, very light. So it has a pattern. After that, you would have some what we call dry days, where there doesn't appear to be anything happening. But woman is woman, there's always something happening.
And can I just stop you
Yes.
there? Just for any listeners, obviously, discern whether it's appropriate, if there's young ears in the audience or anything like that. But I would encourage mothers in particular to take notes right now, because it can be really helpful to guide your daughter through this, because many women didn't get this formation. It just kind of just happens to them, really.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I'd encourage you to take notes as you're explaining it. Go on.
So after the dry days, you would have the beginning of the cycle of leading to ovulation. So we call that the ovulation cycle in a woman's cycle. So ovulation is the main event in a woman's cycle, not the period, but ovulation. And a woman needs to ovulate in order to be a woman. That's how she has children. That's how her hormones are in balance.
Absolutely.
She needs to ovulate. So there are usually 5 to 6 days leading up to ovulation where the woman sees a discharge, which is similar to a period, except that it's not red. And she needs to look for this. It's just not very apparent. You have to learn how to do it properly and to then track it on a chart, which we teach you how to do. And then ovulation happens, and then there are usually 13, 14 days between ovulation and the beginning of a next woman's period. So that's a cycle.
Yeah.
So you have the period, some dry days, some cervical mucus days, and more dry days.
So this is all for anyone that's listening. Yeah, if you just thought that women have a period and that's the end of it, it is that understanding that constantly each day is a new day for the woman because there's a different hormone that's on the rise, and that it's just where men are more so, I understand, on a 24-hour cycle. You know, they start their day anew each day, kind of on a rhythm. And we're on this much longer trajectory of a rhythm. Would you say this right?
So the man's dominant hormone is testosterone, whereas a woman at the beginning of the cycle, her dominant hormone is FSH, follicle stimulating hormone. And then her next hormone that is in dominance is the estrogen. When the ovulation is about to happen, the follicle is 2 centimeters in size, and the level of estrogen is adequate in her bloodstream, she produces the next hormone, which is LH. LH ruptures the follicle in the next 24 to 36 hours. And when ovulation happens, then the corpus luteum, which is the remnants of the follicle, goes on to produce the fourth hormone, which is progesterone. So you need progesterone to lay down a good lining in the womb. You also need estrogen at that time, which you have. And then that lays down the lining in the womb so that if a pregnancy happens, that it can nestle in and stay comfortable for 9 months.
Isn't it incredible? Yeah, that we just take the human body for granted in general, but then in particular, women's body are just like, oh, you hear like, oh, you got pregnant, or we have such bad verbs for it. We say got pregnant, but like it's incredible to see like all the background, all the intricacy that's in the woman's body is just, and this dance of all these.
I was going to say it's like a dance, and it is. It's so intricate, and the women's cycles, like you could almost think of it as the seasons in the year all in one. And it's so beautiful because a lot of that, it speaks to the woman as a whole person. So all of this just happens without us thinking, without us often doing anything. And so I think what's so important is to realise that, like you said, ovulation is the main event because fertility is normal and it's beautiful and it's part of, it's almost like a woman's superpower. It's what it enables us to be as we are, and it can affect our moods in wonderful ways, not just in bad ways as well. So and there's so much to it.
And when we speak about ovulation as well, because, you know, we associate, oh, this is for married life, or this is when you're wanting kids. But no, it's so important for women to know this throughout their whole time of being from the teenage years to menopause, because there's even I've seen like on Instagram and stuff where women are like, oh, if you can understand your rhythm, you can prioritize, like women are more creative during ovulation. Like you can get more things done. You're more sociable. And so like, and then there are times near your period where you just are drawing away from people and you're like, I need to rest and reset.
It's understanding
and it's
yourself.
It's not that you're antisocial. It's just, you need time.
And you give yourself grace, I think, in that kind of way, because you're more patient with yourself. You understand why you are the way you are. And there's a lot of...
And this also feeds into athletics.
Yeah.
You know, where what woman wants to play football during her period? Like, you would need... my theory, about 3 teams to run a proper team of footballers. Teams where they respect the woman's cycle, where they, play to their health and their ability.
Their strengths,
and
yeah.
don't challenge it.
And I think nowadays women, especially like my age group, are being pushed all the time saying like, oh, like go into a career, and like careers are very good. I'm in one. But at the same time, stressful environments actually aren't very conducive to women's health. Like we're not made for the high stress situations and that extreme pressure and those tons of deadlines. Now, women are still going to be in the workplace, and this will still happen. So how can we help ourselves balance that stress for working moms or women that are just, they're single and they're working all the time and things are kind of getting out of whack in their health?
If you chart your cycles, you're charting, it's like taking a photograph of your cycle, of your womanhood. If you put this information on a chart, not an app that doesn't go anywhere, on an actual physical chart, it's amazing how you can manage your stress. I help you to understand cycles. Not every woman's cycle is 28 days. So some women have longer cycles, some women have shorter cycles. But so long as it's a working cycle and it's that woman's cycle, and you have this information in front of you on a chart, you can manage your stress.
Because they're like clues, right?
They are.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
But also by managing your stress, that makes you better able
And aware of your stress.
and better able to manage your life and to manage your children and to be on top of things.
Yeah.
So women who are sort of going against the grain all the time and forcing themselves to do things when they don't know where they're at, they don't know what's happening to them, they're challenged all the time. They're
It's really
suffering from anxiety, they're suffering from depression, they're suffering from
Burnout.
Pushing through all the time.
And
Yeah.
you can't
It's very
live life like that. That's not the way women were supposed to, designed to sort of live life and rear children and, come into menopause. Understanding what's going on. They're supposed to understand all of this. And unfortunately, the information is not out there, but we do have it.
Yeah.
And we can teach it.
Yeah. Just because it hasn't been passed down does not mean that we should shrug our shoulders and say, oh, well, and just, take it as it comes. That we women should be proactive in learning about our cycles, because it's not just for marriage, because many women don't end up married. It's also saying, I want to be my best self. I want to help the other people in my life, and I can only do that if I take that time to take care of my health. Like an empty well can give no water, right?
Yes.
So it's all that concept. And even then down the road, it's also helping you as a wife and a mother too, because imagine having to, I'm saying imagine because I'm not married currently, I'm engaged, but being on this cycle constantly with all these changes, and then you have all these kids that are dependent on you, and a husband that doesn't have the same hormones as you, and
Exactly.
So it's just so integral.
Yes. But husbands who have wives whose wives are charting and they're helping them with the chart understand their
They're so
wives
involved in
such
it.
a different way to the guy who doesn't have any of this understanding. They travel through life together in a much deeper way than you would if you were just going your separate ways.
Yeah.
And so just coming back to the pill flatlines a woman's cycle. She starts at the beginning of a cycle. So it's intended to flatline her cycle. So she doesn't produce the estrogen. She doesn't produce the ovulation event. She doesn't produce the progesterone afterwards, because she's getting synthetic hormones right through her cycle, which are flatlining her cycle. So she has no ups and downs. But also,
such a limbo.
it's a limbo.
It is.
But yes, so these hormones are effectively shutting down her womanhood. So it's not just preventing her from conceiving children. It's affecting her
So much
whole
more.
life.
Yeah.
Everything about her life.
Yeah.
A woman is a woman because of her hormones.
Yeah. Yeah. And were you going to say more there too?
I was just going to say, you were talking earlier about, you were talking about marriage, but also women that not ever get married and knowing their cycles. And I'd say it's crucial and it's so important because I think it's so important to take care of our bodies because they're such a part of who we are, and we can't separate our souls from our bodies. We are one.
Yeah.
And so in order to function well, we have to be feeling well, and we have to be, and part of that is knowledge. So it's knowing about our bodies, knowing what is normal and what is not normal, and knowing when to seek help, I suppose.
Yeah.
And so by knowing your cycle, you'll soon pick up on things that might not be so normal, that might need a little bit of extra help or attention, and might need even medical attention as such. So there's so much more to just the cycle and knowing the cycle, but it also helps you to seek attention early when you might need to for various conditions and various things like that.
And that kind of leads me into a new topic as well. It's just kind of, I'm starting to see that, and maybe this has always been the case because the world is never perfect, but more and more conversations are happening about different foods, different chemicals, whether it's in our shampoos, whether it's in our food itself, and the ultra processing that we have today, that are really messing with women's health. And so endometriosis, PCOS, these things are on the rise. And I was wondering, we probably won't be able to give like a full insight into these issues that are arising, but could you give like a quick snapshot of what those two might be? Because those are probably the most common that women are experiencing.
Yeah, so it's PCOS and endometriosis. So to sort of put it back to the cycle, so PCOS happens when there's a lot to it, but basically what you might see is that you have these long irregular cycles and periods that are very irregular, you're not sure where they're happening. But underneath all of that, that's the one part of it. There's also a lot of what we call metabolic changes. So women's health is very much affected by PCOS, not just in the case that she might not be ovulating regularly, but in the fact that it can affect things like her insulin, so she might have glucose intolerance. It can lead to heart disease later in life. So there's so much to it that should be identified and should be managed, because it might not just affect her when she's young, but also when she's older, in ways like that. Endometriosis is also a really big and very important one. I would say it's one of the leading causes of infertility.
And miscarriage.
And also causes a lot of pain and discomfort. The difficult thing about endometriosis as it is right now is that it can take years in sort of the traditional systems that we have for it to be diagnosed, because it's one of those things that doesn't have very clear symptoms, but is so important. The one thing about endometriosis as well is, in many ways, it isn't by no means a malignancy or a cancer, but the way it is spread is so similar to that, and it can be so invasive. So I think the earlier that it is diagnosed, the better it is for women.
Because you may not see, my understanding is you may not see external symptoms, but there are things like fatigue and depression and these changes, even if it's not like a huge growth, because it's not a growth that you can see on the outside,
often
correct?
It's very tiny little growths on the inside
Yeah.
that you wouldn't know were there.
Yeah.
And the symptoms are not always that obvious, but
But the woman is still suffering.
with it.
Yeah,
very
and you
much
can
so.
tell still.
Yeah,
Right.
absolutely.
So going back to the teacher part of it,
Yeah.
which I am, I like to explain endometriosis in this way. So when a woman menstruates, and with endometriosis, it is that same lining which should be leaving the body, but for some reason manages to get outside of the womb
Oh, dear.
into the pelvic cavity. So it can latch on to her ovaries, her tubes, her bowel, her
Anywhere. It's even been found in the lung, in the brain, in the diaphragm underneath the lungs, any part of the body pretty much.
in the abdominal cavity.
Yeah.
Oh, dear.
Also, so when you think about, so your progesterone drops, that's what causes a period to happen. So the progesterone still drops and the period happens, but those little lesions also bleed. But they have nowhere to go. They don't leave the body.
And they cause a lot of inflammation
Exactly.
and a release of a lot of not good chemicals.
So where are they going? You're reabsorbing them.
Wow. And this is why, that just because, exactly, just because things might be ticking along or you might be getting the minimum checks in women's health, it doesn't in no way mitigates all these things that are happening in the external, in the body, because it's just like it affects your mental health, your physical health, obviously, and that doesn't separate us because we're body and soul. It's the whole of us is just feeling the discord, wouldn't you say, too?
Yes. Yes.
So we might go to a song break, actually. So we are here today with NaProTechnology, and this is Radio Maria with Pure in Heart. Thank you very much. Okay, and welcome back to Pure in Heart today. We have some special guests. So we have Nurse Kay and Dr. Kirsty speaking with us today on women's health. So we've been learning a lot, and I'm excited to go through a few more topics. So if you have any questions or anything like that, you can send them to Radio Maria at 089 467 2000. That's 089 467 2000, and they always pass on your kind comments and your questions to us. And then I will also make sure that we do a shout out for your contact details and for your different websites as well. So I was thinking about going through, we've talked about a great amount of things right now, but maybe going back to just your origin story or like why, I say your origin story, but why you were set up in the first place, where you were set up, like your Irish roots. Would either of you be willing to, share a bit on that?
Sure. So back in 1968, Pope Paul VI wrote the encyclical Humani Vitae. And at that time, the pill was starting to become popular, and IVF was starting out in life at that time. So Dr. Hilders, who was a medical resident, I think that's what they call it in the States, gynecologist. He wasn't too sure what he really wanted to do. But he was Catholic, and he wanted to sort of be true to his faith. So he read Humani Vitae, and when he read it, it suggested that men of science should look into what made a woman's body tick, because the church at that particular time knew from fairly recent studies, as in the Billings method, that women had cycles. They weren't fertile all the time. And so Pope Paul VI threw down the gauntlet and suggested to men of science that they would get together and try and understand women's cycles and develop a system where women could avoid pregnancy without resorting to the contraceptive pill.
And all within the teachings of the Catholic Church.
All within the teachings of the Church. So Dr. Hilders and his wife Sue went to Australia to meet John Billings and his wife Lynn, who weren't gynecologists, but who had, I think they were paediatricians, but they certainly were coming from a medical background, but they had started studies on the Billings method and sort of written a book, but the teaching around it or the standardised terminology wasn't sort of developed at that time.
Okay.
So when Dr. Hilders then got permission from the Billings to bring the information that they already had back to the States, and Sue gathered a few people, nurses in particular, and she taught them what she knew. And
that's amazing.
She started then and some of them would have already known the Billings method and would have been using it for their own family planning. And it was good. But again, that's what I'm saying. It wasn't standardized. So every woman would have different descriptions for what she was seeing. So it became very apparent that they needed to standardize how women looked for the different symptoms in a cycle and how they described them, and how they charted them.
And these are, when we say symptoms, they're tracking your emotions and they're tracking your physical
Well, you're
physical
you're
signs.
charting the period.
The physical signs of your cycle.
The physical signs of your cycle.
Okay.
And then you tune in naturally
Yeah.
to your emotions and everything else is going on through that. But we're not actually charting them per se. We're just charting the physical signs of your cycle, which would be the period, the cervical mucus, and all the dry days in between.
And any unusual bleeding.
And any unusual bleeding, So when the standardisation happened then, and Sue would be looking at these charts, and the different practitioners would look at these charts, and they would see all kinds of unusual things showing up on the charts, and they didn't know what to do with it. And what to say to the women, and the women who might started out avoiding pregnancy, wanted to have children, but they found that they couldn't have children, maybe, or they were having miscarriages.
And this was all coming from the 1960s, where there was so much confusion, particularly. It's in the States, it went through a tumultuous time, but especially in the UK and stuff like that. I think we were a bit too poor maybe to care at that time, but in Ireland we had bigger problems. But that's so. The Catholic Church needed to do something to help, to step in.
Yes. So when Dr. Hilders, so Sue would give the charts to Dr. Hilders, and he would look at them and say, I know nothing about this. But he was a gynecologist, and he was like all the other gynecologists. There was no research done. So he started doing the research.
Wow.
And this is where the St. Paul VI Institute in Omaha, Nebraska grew.
Wow.
It was established back in the early 70s.
Okay.
And all the research started there. And they started to research cycles based on what we teach, which is now the Creighton model system. So
they're kind of the highest level in the sense of you get your insights from them?
Yeah, so they're the institute that educate everybody. So
Whoa.
Yeah, all of us that do NaProTechnology and the Creighton model.
That's incredible.
Yes, so we
all
have
from
the
one
American
source.
Academy of Fertility Care Practitioners, which is the academy attached to the St. Paul VI Institute, or grew out of the St. Paul VI Institute. So as practitioners, our accreditation is through the American Academy of Fertility Care Professionals.
Wow.
And the research is done in the St. Paul VI Institute.
So just to say that everything that we do is accredited and has ongoing research and is up to date in terms of the science and the methodology behind it.
Yes.
And we think that that's really important too.
Because I think this is kind of a sidebar right now, but today we all know, and this isn't going to be the topic for today, of course, and this can be a very sensitive topic for some people, but it's just kind of to mull on this, so we might not go into it. But I just thought it was interesting that, IVF is really being pushed now as the only answer to infertility. And there are couples that are clearly hurting and wanting a child and for whatever reason are experiencing issues. And they're spending thousands down the drain on something that isn't in alignment, unfortunately, with church teaching because of the methods that it uses. Whereas this is truly working with nature, with what God gave us. It's working with woman's body to help heal her health, and in hopes of bringing about a child. But it's mostly, first and foremost, for the woman's health. Would you say?
And
too?
it's for the investigation. So without the fundamental chart and the picture of what's going on, the photograph of what's going on in a woman's cycle, you cannot treat it.
And so just to add to that, which is a bit more about what NaProTechnology is, it's cooperating with a woman's cycle to restore natural fertility where there might be a problem. And the tragic thing, well, there are many, but one of the tragic things about IVF is it never addresses the root cause of her infertility. It kind of bypasses her fertility to give her a much loved and wanted baby, but it never truly speaks to what is going on and what is wrong. And so even after that might happen, the woman is still left with something that's hurting her body, something that's causing harm. And that's something we definitely seek to address with NaProTechnology.
Definitely. And like you said, like it's these Band-Aids that are being offered are just like alternative solutions by the culture, whether it's the pill, whether it's IVF. The biggest problem that we're seeing is that, like you exactly just said, it's not going to the root. And the woman is still facing something and not having the resources to understand herself.
More than that, I think a huge part of what we do, there's obviously the scientific and the medical side, but it's building couples.
Yeah.
A lot of what we do is about their spirituality.
Spice.
We call it spice.
Oh, yes, yes.
Kate can
Oh,
speak
please,
more about
yeah.
this.
Spice.
Yeah.
So spice stands. So when I teach a couple, I have a follow-up form, and at each follow-up we do different things. And we so apart from teaching the standardized terminology and understanding the variations in the cycle and what's going on, we also talk about relationships. So SPICE stands for spiritual, S, P for physical and psychological. I is for intellectual, C is for communicative and creative, and E is for emotional. So these are all the different aspects of your relationship. No matter what relationship, every couple has these elements.
And not just couples, individuals. It speaks so much to our sexuality, our humanity, who we are as women. All of that is for everybody, I would say.
Everyone wants, it's different ways of feeling connection, and especially when you're looking at the marriage itself, like it is funny to use that acronym, because it's like adding a little spice to your marriage is saying actually being connected in these different areas of your life, because they're all part of your day-to-day, you know, whether it's just a hug, whether it's saying, okay, there are words of affirmation person, I'm going to do that, or I'm going to go to this concert that may not interest me for the guy or the girl. But it's taking those steps to connect with someone.
And you can imagine if you weren't communicating, your relationship is not going to last very long.
Yeah.
If you're not emotionally supporting one another, your relationship is not going to last very long. So each one of those elements is really important to nurture on a daily basis, not just sort of, it's a daily thing.
And if you're going through the journey of infertility and you want to become parents together, I think building your relationship and building on that as a couple will set you in such good stead to be parents. It's so important not to just focus on the infertility itself, but on your relationships.
Yeah, because then it becomes this huge obstacle that everything revolves around, where please God, like we don't have a right to children, but please God, in a loving marriage, you get the gift of children, and if not, your life is still fruitful in many ways. But yeah, it doesn't mean at the first sign of difficulty that we don't go seek help. You know, of course, it's very natural for us to want to have children and to want to do it in the way that is most natural for all involved, and that's in accordance with the Catholic Church. You mentioned, I'd like to go back to that actually. You mentioned Humanae Vitae, and I think I cut you off on a tangent. I'm sorry. But I think that's so important to understand that the church backs women. We hear secular stuff about whatever the people think the church teaches or what they think about what the church teaches on sexuality. They can be very often misconceptions. So check the catechism, check papal documents. And so it's great that you're sourced in Humanae Vitae.
Yes, and so in order to have children, there are only a number of days in each cycle where you can have children, where you can conceive, not the whole cycle.
Yep.
So God gave us a minimum, well, I won't say a minimum, but a cycle of in or around 28 days. It could be 30 days, it could be 40 days, but he gave us cycles. And only a small part of that, 8 to 9 days in total, are actually fertile when a woman can actually conceive. So all of the other days are there for while you're waiting for your next pregnancy or you're spacing your children. You have those days,
these
of
ebbs and flow,
which are all part of your Eunice. We need days of fertility. We need days of infertility. We have them all.
And I think it was great, Dr. Kirsty, what you were saying earlier, that I've heard the example as well myself, and it might be helpful for our listeners to understand that when we're talking about fertility and infertility and the windows in the cycle, to understand it like the seasons. That's just like it can't be harvest time all the time. Like it can't be summer where you're doing all these busy chores. There needs to be winter. There needs to be spring. There needs to be that building towards and that like you said, crescendo and decrescendo. So
I think that helps us to appreciate things more. So there's
Yeah.
a time where you have to be quiet and reflective, where you might not have a lot of energy. And that's a good time of introspection where you can look inwards. There might be a time when you're grumpy and short with everyone, but perhaps that's a good time for the people
Renewal.
around you, your family, to show you a bit of love and understanding and patience.
Yeah.
So I think everything, I mean, we see it in nature, everything has its balance and everything is perfect in its own way and in its own time. And I think
Yeah.
women are very much like that too. We are perfect, we are beautiful
Mm-hmm.
and wonderful. And I think the more we realise that in what seems so imperfect, in this up and down and being 1 minute very excitable and happy and full of energy and the next minute grumpy and just not on top of things. In
Yeah.
all of that might seem chaotic, there's a great purpose and there's a great, there's just a great plan in all of that.
Yeah. And I was just thinking about moms that are running around like giving their, like pouring out themselves for their loved ones. And, you know, they might have kids and they might not be struggling with fertility at all. But I was wondering if you could expand upon how, you know, they may not be tracking. And so they still feel that kind of like, why is everything so crazy right now? And then like, why am I going through, they may not even recognize PMS symptoms, you know? So I was wondering, could you talk maybe a bit about PMS and maybe a little bit about how even if you're not struggling with fertility, how it's still good to learn to track?
Of course.
So, yeah.
So I'll speak about PMS and
Yeah.
then onto.
Yes.
So I would say there's normal PMS and then there's abnormal PMS. Normal PMS is probably 1 to 3 days before your period is due. You can expect to feel tired. You can expect to feel bloated. You can expect to have irritability, be craving sort of sweet things and carbohydrates, that sort of thing. And you might have a few abdominal cramps and things like that. And that gives you a good indication that your period's on its way. I also say to women in this time, give yourself grace. So if you are craving that chocolate or that piece of cake, that's perfectly all right. You're not going to be doing that the whole month long, so that's all right.
Yeah.
So that's PMS that should be short in nature. Where it becomes abnormal is where those symptoms become very intense. So instead of just irritability, you now have depression or very intense feelings that might need to be dealt with. Or if it becomes very long, so instead of just the 1 to 3 days, suddenly it's going on for a week, 2 weeks, so half of your cycle, half of the month, you spend feeling miserable. Now that's the time where I'd say you definitely need to look for help
Well,
because it shouldn't be
That's
like
what
that.
we-
that's debilitating.
Yeah,
That's and so yes. So then we put that on your chart,
you can see what's
and
happening.
so I'm teaching somebody, and I'm sort of saying, okay, you need to go and see Dr. Kirsty because this is not right. You should not be feeling like this.
Yeah.
You know, you're
And as
getting
women,
no
we
sleep.
tend to just push through and think this is us.
Yeah.
Yeah.
We've done this all our
Yeah.
lives, but it's not. You're not supposed to feel like that.
And I think as well, even for women Googling like their symptoms, you know, how Googling your symptoms can be very not helpful. But like they can say, oh, you can have an average amount of cramps or an average amount. But as women, we never experience what anyone else experiences. So
No,
that's
there's
why this is so important to get feedback. To like first go, because I don't know if I explained that difference, but it's first understanding to chart with you, Nurse Kay. And then so it's going through that. And when you're seeing those abnormalities, you're saying, hey, you need to seek help.
Yes.
And so that's going to Dr. Kirsty looking into things.
Just to explain that a little bit.
Yeah.
So once you chart, the chart is like a picture of what's going on inside you. And from that, we get these biological markers that tell us what is happening. And so you can almost tell a woman's whole story from her chart, is the way I'd put it. You can tell the story over months, over weeks of exactly what's going on. And from that, we can pick up crucial bits of information to tell us this shouldn't be happening or this is not normal. You shouldn't be experiencing this. And from there to be referred to NaProTechnology, and NaProTechnology will look into greater detail in conjunction with your natural rhythm and your natural cycles to correct that and to see and to diagnose and to correct. But just to add to that is, and I think this is so important for women to know, women have a sixth sense about things. They have an intuition, and I really believe
And
this.
it's true. Yeah.
If you think that something is wrong, if you feel worried about something, and I know that can be too easily dismissed, but don't let it be. Just keep going, keep asking questions and keep seeking help, because I think that's very important. I really do think that's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, not to accept. Yeah, that you don't just have to, especially as
Accept it.
Catholics, sometimes we might be like, oh, accept your cross.
And accept suffering.
And that's good. We should have a healthy attitude towards suffering, and God can send us suffering to kind of bring good fruits out of it. But at the same time, just like any other diagnosis, the church encourages you, you know, you have the ability to help yourself, to help heal your nature, whether it's cancer, whether it's anything. And so this, just like anything else, you have a symptom, you go ask someone about it. So I would love if we could normalize for mothers, for young women, even just as well for our male listeners, if we have any at this point right now. If you are there, kudos. Very good job. But just like passing on, like if you see your girlfriend struggling with something, if you see your wife has these huge, colossal emotions, you can just be like, all right, okay,
Support her.
maybe I can help you get some resources, get the help that you need. Would you expand upon that in any way? Or
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I think, yeah.
So any guy who is in a relationship with a woman would love her to be charting because he would understand her in a way that guys don't understand women and women don't understand women.
yeah.
So you have a whole new understanding
It's kind of a roadmap.
of
Yeah.
your
Yeah.
manhood and your womanhood through charting, and charting the Creighton model system in particular, because that's what I teach. But in that understanding, your relationship improves
It really does, because you're in constant communication with each other.
and your health improves
And you feel better.
and you feel much better. And I love to teach teenagers. They can't get enough of this. They're not in relationships.
Yeah.
But they
They
know
want to
they
understand their
want-
bodies.
They
Yeah.
really do. They want to. So I have 15-year-olds, 16-year-olds, 18-year-olds.
That's incredible.
So and
Yeah.
then they meet people along the way. They fall in love along the way. They fall out of love along the way.
Yeah.
They get engaged. They learn. Now we're starting to teach them how to use their chart for to avoid pregnancy when they get married, or to space
Achieve
their children and
pregnancy.
to achieve pregnancy. To see the biomarkers, to recognise the biomarkers that they will need to fix before they go on the journey of parenthood or wanting to be parents. And then through married life, then where they're avoiding and achieving pregnancy. And then eventually everybody comes to menopause. So we have this category of perimenopause that we sort of talk to women about when they reach the age of 40. And I learned this when I was just coming into that age group. And it was the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah.
I cannot imagine managing or trying to work my way through perimenopause without the resource that I had, which was my chart.
Yeah.
And at the time, because I was I was the first practitioner in Ireland. I had to reach out to my American friends and colleagues to ask them, how am I going to manage this? My chart is saying this, 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 and this. How do I manage it? And they guided me through it. So now I can help other women wade their way through perimenopause. Most women in Ireland and all over the world who have been on the pill or who have just been using an app to track their cycles or whatever, they don't know what a normal cycle looks like. So they don't know what's happening when the cycles become abnormal. But when you're charting, it doesn't matter whether it's long, short, or irregular or what it is. We're working with you on that day. So today is a given day. That's all we need to worry about. Where am I today? And this,
Step by step.
all of those days lead up to a picture. So we know that a woman is in perimenopause by her chart, by her symptoms. And when she gets to somewhere between 50 and 52, she will have her last period. She doesn't know that that's going to be her last period. So she's not menopausal till she's not had a period for 1 whole year.
Okay.
So perimenopause is,
The lead
as
up.
I said, we start at 40 considering perimenopause. And managing our cycles so as that we understand them. And we can start taking precautions if we need to start taking precautions for menopause. So we need to start looking at our bones.
Bone health.
Need to start
Brain health. Heart health.
Yes.
All of that.
All of the different health aspects. And to make sure that our bones don't fall apart when we become menopausal. And we don't all need HRT. But we do need to manage our symptoms if we have them.
Yeah.
And we can do that very effectively once we're on top of it. We're not coming into it at 50 with all of these symptoms drowning us.
Yeah.
We have been managing
the
the symptoms from the beginning.
Attention to what our bodies are doing.
And then again, that's real love, like enabling your spouse to go in and get that help to understand herself as all these changes are going on inside herself. And all of us have been a teenager at one point. So it's incredible that you get to train teens so early on to start understanding themselves, that change in their body. We're coming to a close, so I wanted to just mention some things. So for a consultation, I believe from our conversation that meeting with you, the initial one would be 100, and then it goes to 80 afterward because you need that follow-up. You need that, that person to help you interpret what's happening.
Yeah.
And
so
then,
the introductory session is where everybody starts, no matter what you're doing in this system, whether you need it for infertility, whether you need it for just
anything.
Yeah. The initial consultation takes about 2 hours because I teach you what a cycle looks like, all kinds of things.
Yeah.
Stuff that you've never heard of before. Some you might have had an inkling but didn't quite understand. So we do. So it's about a 2-hour session. Wow. And then I give you your charting pack. So you start charting your cycles from wherever you are at on that particular day. And then I see you 2 weeks later and 2 weeks later and 2 weeks later and 2 weeks later. So as we're doing the education in bite-sized chunks.
Yeah, that's the most important thing, because women, we have so much on our plate that we're like, oh, this is the last thing I can add right now. Yeah. But it's integral.
Yes, it's integral. And then after that, then we space the follow-ups out. So I have women who have been with me for years and years and years. There's no end to the number of times I can, teach them something new.
Yeah.
And from every client, I learn something as well.
Yeah, because everyone, has like a different symptom or a different way of experiencing their cycle. So women are very varied.
So once you start, don't put a timeline on it. This is forever.
And it's financially, well, please God, for most. Yeah. It's like we can also put it off because we're like, it's too expensive. I can't do this right now. But it's just like 80, we can work towards 80, and it's working down that.
And I can negotiate. I'm, we do talk about, if somebody can't afford it, all they have to do is say, tell me.
Yeah, tell me what you can for right now.
I want any woman to miss out.
For me, it's very important that every woman. So our mission really is to change the world one cycle at a time. So as every woman understands her natural cycles.
That's wonderful. Well, we only have a couple of minutes left, so I was wondering, have we not? Oh, well, I want to give a shout out to your website, so I have it right here. So for the one on women's health, first, it would be fccirl.ie. So fccirl.ie. And then for going more down the road of Dr. Kirsty to be checking those abnormalities that are happening, it would be naprobaby.ie. And then, do you have any kind of notes that we haven't got to cover in this session?
FCC stands for Fertility Care Centres. So just even Google Fertility Care Centres of Ireland, because all of the practitioners are affiliated to Fertility Care Centres of Ireland. And then naprobaby.ie will give you an overview on the 3 programs that we do.
And this is all under the teachings of the Catholic Church.
All of it is.
Which is wonderful.
And the other thing, I suppose, is that we have opened up a centre very recently in Kells, County Meath.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Called St. Bridget's Centre for Female Health and Fertility.
That's wonderful.
And this will be our office.
That's our home.
Our home from here on in.
That's
so
great.
This is brand new.
Well, I'm sadly having to draw us to a close right now, but thank you so much for traveling today to be with us and just to explain more about women's health. And I hope that our listeners got a lot out of this and can pass on that information. It's fccirl.ie or naprobaby.ie. Thank you so much, both of you. And
Thank you.
join us next week from 4 to 5 p.m. on Tuesdays. God bless.